Hello, my name is Alex, and this is another chat from the Seven Figure Traveller Academy. And today I'm introducing another mini series called How Much Do You Need to Know About the Travel Network? And today's subject is buses. How much do you need to know about your local bus network or a bus network anywhere in the world? Do you need to know a little, or do you need to know a lot? Well, in my area of Devon in the West Country, there is one bus company that dominates the area. I shan't tell you their name, but it's got the word coach in it, which is an interesting decision for a bus company. Anyway, I'm a bit of a person who likes to use public transport because I just see it as a more interesting way to travel about, and if it's there, you should make the effort to use it. And obviously, when a bus company has a large network, and I think in Devon's case, this company probably has many routes. Well, I know they have many routes, and some of them will sneak into other adjacent areas. So do I know all of the routes it goes on? No. I only look for the routes between destinations that sound interesting to me. So it really, it revolves around need, doesn't it? What are the most interesting locations you could visit, and what routes serve those destinations? Now, one such destination in Devon is Exeter, and there are lots of routes that crisscross Exeter. And depending on where you want to go, obviously decides which part of Exeter you go into first. Now, because I also am a rail user, if there's somewhere I want to go to, then that bus route better be near one of the two rail stations that I regularly use, because I cannot see myself walking an extra mile just to get the right bus stop for the even if the destination is of wild interest to me, it would put me off if I couldn't easily make a connection to the bus route. Now you think, well, don't all bus routes take similar routes? Well, they don't. You look at a bus route map and they serve different purposes. The city, the centre of Exeter does have a lot of buses passing through, but they're not all the same routes and frequencies. When I was growing up, my father's from Dorset. We would fairly regularly go down to the south coast. He used to be from Bournemouth and Christchurch, and there were loads of buses. We would go all over the place, quite a few times down the coast, and it's a beautiful area. And the bus network there was busy enough so that it didn't matter if the bus routes didn't all start at the rail stations. My dad had enough knowledge, having grown up in the area, so if we got to the end of a bus route, there was another bus route that crisscrossed the one that just finished, and we could go for absolutely miles. However, he got a very different experience when my parents moved to Oxfordshire. He had a job in Oxford, and we lived in a town called Didcot, and he would take the train into Oxford and then take a bus into town, as he used to call it, where he worked at the university site. And this worked well until one occasion where he missed the last bus, and we didn't see him until 3 a.m. the next morning. And it was at this point that my mother suggested that maybe this was the time for him to learn how to drive. Now you might think, well, why did he not want to start driving? It was because, well, he was born in an era, the early 1930s, where most people didn't have their own transport. Hardly anybody had a car. Not many more people had a motorbike. So you used public transport. So I guess it was part of his DNA. He didn't think about it until this one time that it became a bit of an emergency, and he didn't have any option. When I started to drive, I think back to those days. Well, I didn't actually start driving until about 5 years after my first job. I used to cycle everywhere, and the 1970s was a time when there still wasn't a lot of car usage. My parents were totally unconcerned about me cycling anywhere and everywhere, because there'd be times, even on a 5-mile ride, that you would see absolutely no one. You'd try and tell that to one of the grandkids today, and they just wouldn't believe it. Today, kids can't wait to learn how to drive, because it's regarded as, safer in some aspects. It's not quite the same as it used to be for pedestrians and cyclists alike. I know there are plenty of examples where it is improving, but it tends to be in towns and cities, or where perhaps old railway lines get converted for other uses, but they're not necessarily everywhere. So the car has become a very dominant mode of transport. So maybe the question about buses is should you use the car or a bus? What's the advantages and disadvantages? Well, briefly, my story with cars was that it represented a sense of freedom, that I felt more independent. I could drive more or less anywhere in the UK, and I could be pretty sure of being able to park anywhere. Today, you cannot be certain of a car space in busy towns and cities, and in some cases you can't even be sure of a car space next to your own house. I used to live opposite a couple of families who had 5 or 6 cars for the whole family, and it was in a street that was never designed for motor vehicles. So consequently, it was difficult finding somewhere to park, even if you were a 1-car family. But the thing that has changed in the transport network, and it does benefit the bus network and the rail network and the car network, is the growth of transport hubs. When I first became aware of such a thing, I think it was when they first invented this thing called a park and ride. There was 2 or 3 of these locations around the edge of Oxford, and they quickly got named Park and Pray, because these places, nobody really knew how popular they would become, and they weren't well lit. There was no such thing as security cameras, and it was exactly as the name suggests. You couldn't be certain that your car would still be there when you got back, despite the free bus services that were available. But now these things have taken on a greater need, because due to the greater congestion on our roads, both on dual carriageways and motorways alike, the car is a well-used item, right? Let's call it an item, shall we? And where you're constantly thinking, if I take it somewhere, where am I going to put it? and will it be safe wherever I leave it? And this is where transport hubs are now taking on a much greater role. So if you can find one that would be part of your transport need, they are now they're much better lit places, they're better maintained. There are cameras. It's usually combined with a bus station or a rail hub. Clearly airports have been doing this now for quite a lot longer, but generally speaking, these hubs are becoming more important. So rather than take your car all the way, it's now worth considering taking your car somewhere else. Now that, because 96% of all road journeys are by car and not by public transport. Now, the other thing I didn't realise until I moved to the West Country was that bus frequencies alter according to where you are on the network. You might say, well, of course they will. They're going to be more frequent in the key areas. But I found an interesting anomaly that's not generally publicised, and that even with the same route number, the frequencies changed according to how far out the bus was travelling, and they'd used the same numbers just to make it more interesting. But to give you a clue, they would add a letter on the end, number followed by an A or a B or a C. So they were going to specific towns or villages outside at the ends of their routes, and it meant that the frequencies went up to about 30 minutes as opposed to nearer where they all crossed over, which could be every 15 minutes or 10 minutes. So when I looked at the bus timetabling, they actually mentioned this phrase called the call route, and that's where the best frequencies were. And near where I live, it's about a quarter to a half a mile is the distance between the frequent and the infrequent. And for months I was like, why is it taking half an hour here for a bus to show up and only 15 minutes half a mile down the road? Well, that is why. And only when you do a little bit of research do you actually find out these things. Now, a friend of mine I used to work with in Oxfordshire, he moved to Oxfordshire from London, where of course the buses are very frequent. If you wait 5 minutes for a bus in central London, there must be a serious problem. So when he moved to Oxfordshire and found the buses were only every 30 minutes, he had what I can only describe as a breakdown, or shall we say, is it possible to suffer from a lack of buses? Well, he had withdrawal symptoms, I think, for about 6 months. I really thought he was going to move back to London. He was so affected by a lack of buses. So what works for you can work for your potential customers, and this is why it's worth doing a little bit of research about the bus companies in your area. So how much do you need to know? Well, you only need to know enough to help the people you're helping. You don't need to know everything about the entire network. What are the interesting starting points and end points? That's really what it's all about. So that's a little foray into how much you should know about your bus network or a bus network. You only need to know enough. So remember, when it's done well, today's experience is tomorrow's desire. Catch you next time.